So I'm protecting the knee. I'm not unevenly tugging at the knee. Deep inhalations, long, complete exhalations. A few more rounds of breath here on this side. And then we'll add in a twist. And back to downward facing dog. So now we're doing pigeon with a twist. The left knee forward, pigeon. And again, I'm just pausing here to lengthen, to find the space, to activate the front foot and lengthen back through the right leg. Hips are square to the front, so I'm not sitting over unless I'm doing a modified version for my knee, in which case you might be even doing a reclining figure four or a seated pose. And then I'm coming to forearms. So here's the twist variation. I'm inhaling length through the spine, and then on my exhalation, I'll thread the left arm behind the right elbow. Twist on this side, front foot is active. Inhale back to center. Exhale the right arm behind the left elbow. And back to center. Another variation of that twist that you may or may not enjoy is to inhale length and walk the hands around. Inhale length, deepen into the twist, and on your exhalation, perhaps bring the shoulder down to the mat or the block. So a different variation. And back to downward facing dog. And feel free to bicycle pedal the legs, come up on tiptoes here in dog, sort of work yourself out. It's not a problem. And the right knee forward, pigeon. Yeah. And the back leg again is straight, front foot is active. So I'm even pressing through the big toe mound and unsickling the ankle to the point where maybe the right outer ankle isn't even on the mat. It lifts up a little bit. And I'm coming forward to forearms. And breathing. And then the twist variation. I'm inhaling length and exhaling the arm behind the elbow. And back to center. And inhaling length and exhaling the arm behind the elbow again. And back to center. The variation of a more upright twist. Inhale length, exhale, walking the hands around. So I'm taking my time, inhaling length and exhaling my way around. Inhaling length and then exhaling the shoulder. Maybe it goes to the block, maybe to the floor. And all the way back to center. And then back to downward facing dog. Face Marissa. And let's rest in child's pose. The knees apart, the big toes touching. And you might want to let the knees separate even wider in child's pose, a little bit more of a hip release. Whatever comfortable variation of child's pose you enjoy. Okay, so we'll shift into a really nice hip release that uses Baddha Konasana, or cobbler's pose. And this is one I learned from one of my favorite teachers, Doug Keller. So I'm using the block, but I'm not using it right now. I just have it close by. So often what you see, and we're not going to use a blanket, which is unusual. So often what you see when people talk about cobbler's pose or Baddha Konasana, you'll see this happening. Okay, we're moving into Baddha Konasana. I'm holding, and then this is happening. There's no lumbar curve. There's no alignment of the spine. So we're doing it in a different way. I've got my feet out in front of me, and the soles of the feet are facing each other. The knees are a little bit bent, not very much. And I'm using my hands. I'm lengthening up through the spine. I'm using the hands to create length through the spine. And then either flat palms, loose fists, fingertips, whatever works best for me, I'm shifting the hips toward the heels. And I'm walking my hands forward as well and lengthening. Your knees don't have to touch. I'm going to push my feet together and reach out through the knees. I'm lengthening up through the crown of the head. And then I'm going to shift my way back. Here's where the block comes in. I can use my hands to lift the thighs. Putting the block out here, my feet are on top of the block, and the knees are a little bit bent, feet are out in front, and again, nice long spine. I'm going to shift the hips forward, and you don't have to be up on top of the block, and you're not parallel parking on the block. Walk my hands in, and then I'm going to do a little cat-cow movement, exhaling, rounding, inhaling, sitting bones broad and apart, the shoulders draw back. A few rounds of movement here with the breath. For reasons that Doug Keller can explain perfectly, and I can't even begin to paraphrase, this is an amazing hip release. Exhaling, rounding, inhaling. So I'm coming back upright. I'm going to shift back away from the block. Use my hands to lift the thighs. Slide the block aside. One more Baddha Konasana. The knees are a little bit bent. I'm going to shift the hips toward the heels. And the hands walk in as well. And even if you find this to be a comfortable pose, you might find that you have even more space, more freedom, more ease in this variation of Baddha Konasana now. Pressing the feet together, lengthening through the spine. And then shifting back, I'm going to use my hands to lift the thighs. Okay, you can shake out the legs. We're going to do a couple more hip openers here. Gomukhasana, Agni Stambhasana. Let's start with Agni Stambhasana, and I'll show you how you can use props. So I've got my folded blanket again, because I want to sit up high. So I'm in an easy cross-legged pose. I'm going to reach underneath the sitting bones, widen them back and apart. So I'm sitting up nice and tall. Sit up on enough that you can be sitting up nice and tall. And then I'm bringing the left shin on top of the right shin. Now, maybe this is not happening. Maybe you need the block, not a problem. Maybe you need to draw the feet towards each other a little bit more, or separate the feet apart. So you can make adjustments here. If this knee is up in the air, you can support it with a block. So same feet that we practiced with in pigeon. The feet are active, the toes are spread. I'm pressing through the big toe mound. So I'm trying to unsickle the ankle. This is a sickled ankle. This is unsickled. So sickled, rounded, curved, unsickled, both sides of the ankle equally long. So sitting up nice and tall. And if you like to bring your fingertips to the mounds of the toes, you can sort of push in and push out at the same time. This helps draw the shoulders back. And we're going to spend about 45 seconds here, but you can spend a long time in this pose. You can incorporate it into your everyday life. Maybe if you're watching, Netflix or something, you could be sitting on the floor on your blanket and sitting in Agni Stambhasana. It's called fire logs, and the more time you spend in it, the more you understand that particular name. Not just because it looks like logs are stacked, but because it starts to burn. You can tip forward at the hip creases if you like. The spine is long. But you don't have to tip forward. If doing the pose sitting like this is enough, don't try to add something in, especially if it's going to cause the tailbone to curl under the low back to round. So we don't want any of that going on. Let's do the other side. So you can shake out the legs if that feels good. Left shin underneath the right shin on top. So stack like fire logs. Maybe the heels come in toward the hips. Where that is. Maybe this knee doesn't drop down. There's construction going on around here. And you need to place the block. So the feet are active. The feet are active! We're gonna carry on. We're just sitting in a pose anyway. Nothing has happened since the camera fell on the floor. Seriously, it'll be fine. Oh. We're sitting up nice and tall. Long spine. Are you with the union at all? So breathing, the shoulders are back. And as always, you can make whatever little adjustments you need to make this a more bearable pose. Here's a tip, this is not a very comfortable pose. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, this is super uncomfortable, it's actually a little bit uncomfortable. And you might tip forward at the hip creases. And then go ahead and shake out the legs. And we're going to practice with Gomukhasana, another fun pose. You might want to have your blanket nearby. So here's a good way to get into it. I'm at table. I'm going to bring the left knee towards center, the right knee in front of the left. And I'm going to separate the feet as much as is comfortable to separate them. And watch, I can sit on a block, I can sit on the blanket, I can sit straight down on the floor. So you can use props, Gomukhasana. The shins can be more parallel to the front of the mat. The heels can be closer back toward your hips. So we'll spend 45 seconds here in this pose. The right knee on top of the left. If you did it backwards, no problem, because we're going to do both sides. And the shoulders are back, the spine is long. So you may be sitting up on something. We want the hips to be square to the front, level. So using a blanket, a block, whatever works best. And as always, you can tip forward, and that makes it a little bit more of an intense pose. Feet are active. I'm pressing through the big toe mounds. So even when we're not standing on the feet, we're using the feet. And then you can release out of that side. I'm putting the left knee on top. Come forward to table again and bring the left knee in front of the right. Separating the feet out. And then maybe you're on a blanket here, a block, maybe sitting flat on the floor. Breathing here, pressing out through the mounds of the toes, lengthening up through the spine, enjoying the breath, enjoying the pose. Enjoying the silence for like half a second. Deep inhalations, long, complete exhalations. So the beauty of yoga, once you come to yourself, once you come to your breath, you can really do yoga anywhere. I remember we used to practice at Willow Street Yoga in Silver Spring, and there was always construction. And in our Tuesday evening class, you would always hear the trucks go over the metal plates on the street, that boom, boom. And it became a very soothing sound. Even today, I love the sound of it because it reminds me of those nighttime classes. So you can make of things whatever you like. And then go ahead and undo the legs, give them a little shake. And let's do downward facing dog again. And just feel the difference in your downward facing dog. Remember, in downward facing dog, especially if you tend to be super flexy, we want to add a little more core integrity. So you might come forward an inch with the armpits and keep the armpits lifted even as the heart moves back to the thighs a little bit. Engage the core muscles. The front body is also part of this pose. And then rest in child's pose. And you might find that you can separate the knees even wider apart in your child's pose. It's a little more of a hip opener. So we're going to do one last pose. It's a forward fold, and it's a good way to end our practice before Shavasana. So, we're using the strap. Okay, let's, I'll show you, I'll go sideways here. So, if the inner thigh muscles, the adductor muscles, and the hamstrings are tight, what often happens in our forward fold, it pulls the tailbone under and rounds, right? So we can't get any movement. This is not a forward fold, right? Forward folds really require us to move from the hips, a central hub of movement in the body, from the pelvis, that is. So think of the top of the pelvis shifting forward toward the thighs in our forward fold. So a useful way to do this forward fold is to put the strap over the feet, and this is a wide angle forward fold, Upavista Konasana. My toes are pointing to the ceiling. My knees are bent, really a lot, and pointing to the ceiling. So what happens? I'm holding the strap, long spine, it's Tadasana spine. Press into your heels and isometrically pull back. And what you'll do is engage the hamstrings at the knee, but release them at the sitting bones, the hamstring attachments, that is, so the pelvis can more easily move. And you can even push the feet out into the strap to give yourself more room at the hips. So watch, I'm tipping at the hip creases. I'm not leading with the chin and shoulders. I'm not rounding the tailbone under. So the head's right on top of the spine. I'm trying not to lead with the chin. And you can come to wherever you like. You can start to straighten the legs, dragging the heels bent, pressing out into the strap. You do not need to straighten the legs. So notice I'm not sitting on a blanket, but I'm keeping the knees bent so I can initiate the movement from the pelvis, the central hub of movement in the body. At any point, you can release the strap. You can bring the fingertips to the floor. Inhaling length, and exhaling, extending the heart forward, maybe deepening into the pose. You don't have to. So you can put a blanket behind the knees if you like. That's one way to, especially if you tend to hyperextend, to avoid that. I like to keep the knees just a little bit bent, even as I move more deeply into the pose. So the pose can be anywhere. This might be your pose. You might be laying flat on the floor, your chest on the floor in the pose. It doesn't matter. It's not about what the pose looks like. Forward folds tend to be calming poses, so a nice way to end our practice. And let's go ahead. You might want to shift to Shavasana. We'll take a moment here to say goodbye. So sitting up nice and tall, long spine. Thank you so much for enjoying your practice with us. Thank you, Marissa, for filming. See y'all.